Okay, boys, welcome back. Boy, a lot to cover today. We will be dropping some new podcasts later in the week that are a little bit more forward looking. I think after the Pennsylvania primaries, the Oregon primaries, the Ohio primaries, this is a moment where kind of looking backwards for a second actually might open the path to making some smart predictions, some monetizable predictions, we should always say, going forward. So, Pratik, you're here with me. You're always here with me now. It was your idea. I think like a round of alpha dogs and beta boys with these huge primaries behind us might be a good thing, don't you think? I think you do think that was your idea, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a lot of results from yesterday, some of which were expected, some of them were not. And I think it paints a very murky picture about what the lessons are to draw going forward. So definitely a lot to get into.
Right. Like I think I've got a few things that we can definitely circle as of good bets, safe bets, but there's some other stuff that I think we can kind of meme our way through and maybe find some action going forward. So alpha dogs and beta boys, fan favorite, right?
Yeah, hope so.
You are an alpha dog again, by the way. You were really in my beta dog book, my beta boy book after you said there wouldn't be a war in Ukraine, but you're in my cool book again, Pratik.
Well, I think we should toot our own horn. I mean, I think probably one of the best SSG bets of the year was in the Madison Cawthorn race, North Carolina 11. I don't know. We were recommending throughout to buy nose on him. I was actually able to pick up a number of shares in the 20s on him, so that may be the best bet at least I've made this year. But um,
Yeah,
definitely
pretty
some
good.
others. Yeah.
Pretty strong night. So we had on this podcast flashing red lights, bet no on Kathy Barnett. She's a fake candidate. Turns out she was a fake candidate. And we'd been pumping Oz and McCormick. I mean, it was just a great night in Pennsylvania. We had been pumping, as you said, Madison Cawthorn to lose. The only black eye we took was I was gloating about the idiocy of Bernie Bros saying that what's her face, that fake candidate, Jessica McLeod Skinner would lose her primary over in Oregon, which turned out to not even be remotely the case, just absolutely nuking Kurt Schrader in a much watched House race. But I'll take that. I'll take that win-loss record, wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, and I wasn't. The only thing I knew about Oregon was from the podcast you recorded with Wine Mom, which was terrific, by the way. But I do want to ask you about that. I was just going to note, just for our listeners' benefit, at the time that we're recording, it's Wednesday, May 18th, around 11, and right now the markets are at giving Oz. He's a 67% favorite to win the race. McCormick trading at 33%. So as of right now, we don't know the outcome of that one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll back into that. Really glad to have pumped McCormick shares when they were under 20 cents. You're welcome for those of you who listened. And thank you once again to Charles McElwee, who really just came on the pod, said exactly what was going to happen. No one believed him, but he's basically like the John Ralston or Cuvillon of Pennsylvania. People just don't know it yet, and everything he said happened. So just do whatever Charles McElwee says forever. Anything that has to do with Pennsylvania, I don't care if it's a cheesesteak or an election. So maybe he's our first alpha dog. Let's just say that Charles McElwee, first alpha dog.
Yeah, no, and I think there are a couple lessons to draw from that, which is that, I think I think that those of us in political gambling often sort of throw stones at different experts and so forth. But I think the reality is that expertise does matter. And especially in these races where there are any number of factors that polling is never quite going to capture, national trends are never going to capture. I think there really is no substitute for having people like Charles on the ground who really know the ins and outs of the state, but also who are willing to discipline themselves by engaging with betting and prediction markets. And I think you're exactly right. I mean, the insights Charles brought on our podcast were terrific, and I hope we can get more people like that on in future races.
Yeah, and I don't want to like exclude. We also had Dave Catney's come on, who's a veteran political reporter, and was Dave as ballsy as just like put his man card on the table and say Kathy Barnett's fake? No, but he came on this podcast and said, be real careful with this candidate because all the things she has going for her are like kind of cautionary. She has momentum. The fuck is momentum, you know? So don't want to leave Dave out on the cold, but Charles McElwee, just an absolute for the ages appearance on Star Spangled Gamblers. Just drove the ball down the field right into the end zone. Haters proved wrong. So all right, next let's do this properly though. Okay. So do you want to pick actually? Do you want to pick an alpha boy or a beta?
Well, I think that would be a nice segment to discuss Kathy Barnett. I think we're probably both in agreement that she is a beta, but I think it's important to pin down why.
Well, okay. I was actually going to put her into a larger bucket. You know, I want to be more inclusive on our podcast. Are you woke too?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, well, I think on Beta Boys, I've got fake candidates. So I've got Kathy Barnett in that. I've got Madison Cawthorn in that, and I've also got Carrick Flynn in Oregon in that category. Just a absolutely brutal cycle for fake candidates.
Okay, so I want to actually take issue with the assumption there that they're fake candidates, and maybe we can have a little bit of a debate why. I mean, in terms of Kathy Barnett, my position going into last night was I basically sold off everything because I thought that things were too uncertain. I mean, I think the one I did go in on, I shorted McCormick in Philadelphia. But the point about Kathy Barnett is I actually think it's an interesting question why she collapsed, because if you look at all the polling, it showed her neck and neck. And my theory is that I'm just trying to think like what happened between when the polling occurred and election night. And I can really only think of one thing, which is the reports that confirmed her presence on January 6th with the Proud Boys and all that. But so that my thought is maybe that is the trigger that led her to collapse. But are you of the view that she was never real in the first place?
I'm 100% of the view that she was never real in the first place. And by the way, I have polls on my list of Beta Boys too. I mean, those polls, you guys, thank God for you, like sliding into my DMs and spitting your takes about like why this poll's good or this poll's bad. Wasn't it kind of obvious that all of these polls were bad? I mean, it was just a bunch of random candidates getting about the same vote share. And like, it just, to, to me, like all of this just screamed, no one knows what the fuck is going on. And the fact that this market on who the Republican nominee will be is deep in negative risk just means everything is stupid. And so just don't listen. You know, Kathy Barnett is a fake candidate. She had one good debate performance. Everything else about her was suspect. Fake candidate, fake candidate, fake candidate. Bet against her.
Well, okay, what about it wasn't just polls though that were registering an uptick for Barnett. I mean, the prediction markets had her. They never quite had her taking over Oz, but certainly up there. And then also there was the social media chatter, the national endorsements.
But like, isn't that all fake? I mean, it's like the Twitter candidate. She's the Twitter candidate. She's the endorsements of like random fringe Republicans who only are really known on fringe, like right wing Twitter. Like these are not things that tell you people are going to vote for her.
Also, what are the things that you would look at?
Durability. You know, like she's how many candidates have we seen who like think about the last couple of presidential election cycles, even going back to like 2012 when like Mitt Romney was inevitably the Republican nominee, but like every primary Tuesday there was like a new flavor of the month who he had to destroy with negative oppo research. And I just think we see that over and over again in these races in the like way too online community. There's always a flavor of the month or flavor of the week. And it usually is just a Twitter candidate. And I think Kathy Barnett stunk of Twitter candidate.
Yeah, you know, actually, it is interesting. I mean, one of the analogies when I saw Kathy Barnett's rise, I thought of Herman Cain in the 2012 race.
Yeah.
And I always go back and forth. I mean, I think the conventional view is the one that you outlined, that he was a flash in the pan. It was kind of inevitable that he would eventually go down. But I've always thought, I mean, had the dirt not come out about him, about the woman and so forth, could he not, in fact, pulled off what Trump ended up doing 4 years later? I mean, I guess the point I'm making is in a culture that's based around memes and celebrity and hype and news cycles, can we really ever discount these people? I don't know. I'm kind of conflicted on that.
Well, but I mean, again, like we said all this on the podcast, Kathy Barnett had no money. She was completely unknown in the massive state outside of, whatever congressional district she lost by about as much as Trump did the cycle before. And she only had 2 weeks of game clock left. So I don't know. To me, that was obvious. Like, I understand why maybe for other people it wasn't. But I mean, can we talk about just fake candidates in general? I mean, are you kind of done with? I'm done with fake candidates like her, like Madison Cawthorn, and like Carrick Flynn, the random crypto bro in Oregon who spent 13 mil. Like, I think we can close the book on them.
Okay, well, so I think it's worth talking a little bit more about Cawthorn. So, I mean, the markets were way, for the most part, were pretty optimistic about him, and I think one of the reasons they were is that the last minute, Trump came out and basically gave an endorsement, not a full-throated endorsement, but one nevertheless. But it wasn't enough to overcome all his scandals. So, I guess the question is, I wouldn't label an incumbent congressman with a Trump endorsement a fake candidate. But the markets got it wrong, and I would say the polling was kind of hit or miss on that too. So again, what is the lesson here? Is it that when a guy is just collapsing, he's automatically a fake candidate, or is there some set of
well, I think there's a clear
yeah.
lesson, and I will go to my grave saying that Madison Cawthorn was a fake candidate. But I think the lesson here is that there's an alpha dog we're not talking about right now. Do you know who I'm thinking of?
No, who?
I'm thinking of Matthew Shattuck over at Smarkets. Do you know Shattuck's first rule?
What's that?
Well, I don't know if it's his first rule, but it's one of his rules. It's when on an election day, always fade the market. Like, usually the people will panic and the markets will kind of arbitrarily move towards one candidate or another. And anytime you see that on election day before the votes are counted, like, bet the other way. And I feel like that's exactly what happened with Madison Cawthorn was, some dumb arbitrary move, and the Shattuck rule would have paid really well if you were looking for an entry.
Yeah, that's true. And then what would you say? But what would you say, just to close that out, about the larger lessons to draw from Madison Cawthorn?
That having the support of the local party still matters. That Republican voters are not, in fact, seeking the most like awful, like meme and like shitbag politician. That's actually not actually a thing. I think those two things are important.
Yeah. And then maybe to close it out, what would you say briefly about Carrick Flynn? What's the fake candidate case for him?
Well, I mean, wasn't he like literally a fake candidate? Wasn't he basically living in Washington, D.C. and spending his crypto bros money on a campaign?
I don't know. I was sincerely asking because I hadn't even heard of him until your Wine Mom podcast.
I mean, isn't that sort of the point? Like literally, yeah. It's actually, I guess the lesson is it's harder to buy a seat than people think.
Yeah, and maybe tell me if this is correct, but he strikes me as the kind of candidate that predicted bros are irrationally going to throw money at.
Right. I think so. I don't know if we've already covered this, but I think we've sort of been beating around the bush of another important beta boy in political gambling.
Who's that?
Simple explanations for why things happen.
Okay.
Surely you have something to say about that.
No, I'm eager to hear.
I mean, like we've sort of tried to simply explain these things a lot of ways. Like, oh, well, quality candidates win. So, like, we were just talking about Oregon, right? So Carrick Flynn lost to, what's her name? I think Jessica Salinas, who actually had like a following and had been working in Oregon politics for some time. But, go over one district, and Kurt Schrader, longtime incumbent, kind of moderate Democrat, got absolutely nuked by Jessica McLeod Skinner. And look, I'm not liberal, but even if I was, like, it's obvious that Jessica McLeod Skinner is like an absolute meme of a candidate. So, quality candidates don't always win. So I don't know. I mean, I talk too much, dude. Just let me shut the fuck up.
Yeah, so again, I didn't follow that one closely. I guess, looking at it from the outside, the question would be, I think you made a good point about local party support mattering. So
Yeah.
did she have that, or was she in fact just a genuine outsider?
I don't really know. I did, a lot of the people, we had some guys in our Star Spangled Gamblers group who sort of said early on, like, Keen Dog, you guys way overrated Kurt Schrader's incumbency. A lot of that district has never had to vote for him before. This is ripe for an upset. So, like I said, hard to find a simple explanation that captures everything. It's simple explanations are for beta boys.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the point I would make on that theme is I think we're looking at a very murky picture when it comes to what lessons to draw from a Trump endorsement.
Yes.
Plainly, it matters. I would go as far as to say it's the most important endorsement in American politics right now. I mean, for example, I can't imagine, given how close the margin is right now in Pennsylvania, that Dr. Oz even would have been in contention were it not for
Right.
the Trump endorsement. But as we've seen with now two scandal-plagued candidates, one Madison Cawthorn and the other Herbster in Nebraska, there are real limits on what Trump can do. And I think we're also going to end up seeing that coming up in Georgia. I think David Perdue is basically done. So, again, I think that's probably an area where there are not only no simple explanations, but I suspect as we go farther and farther from the Trump presidency, uh, the impact of that endorsement is going to vary even more.
Right. Like a Trump endorsement can do a lot, but a Trump endorsement obviously can't overcome like being a serial sexual harasser, like a tax cheat, maybe a criminal, like having a serious personality disorder. Like Trump himself. Like, you will lose just like Trump will lose if you're like a certified psycho. And that's what, Hansy Herbie in Nebraska and Madison Cawthorn learned last night.
Yeah. And, I wish I had shared this with our listeners before, but one of the ways I sort of bet last night in order to deal with the uncertainty of Pennsylvania was rather than exposing a lot of my portfolio directly to the outcome in Pennsylvania, I tried to short wherever I could candidates that where the markets were pricing in a Trump endorsement, just because I figured if Oz were to go down, those prices would move. And that paid off if you look in the Arizona market, where the markets, for reasons I don't fully understand, have already priced in the idea that Blake Masters is going to get a Trump endorsement, and that Trump endorsement is really going to put him over the top. I mean, I don't take, at least not at the prices that were trading before Pennsylvania. I think the markets were way too optimistic. I mean, Jim Lamon's a quality candidate. Berdovich is an incumbent AG. So I think that's maybe another strategy that we can talk about going forward that I
Well,
think is going to pay dividends.
I was actually going to give an alpha dog laurel to the other side of this bet.
Who?
Rich guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, rich guys like David McCormick, rich guy. Glenn Youngkin, super rich guy. Dr. Oz, rich guy. Peter Thiel, the super rich guy who is like the real force behind JD Vance, another rich guy, and Blake Masters, also a rich guy. Like, this is the season for rich guy outsiders.
Well, so I was with you right up until the very last word. I think outsiders is actually the operative term here, because I think, look, I think both of us and anyone who's been in politics for a long time, we've dealt with all kinds of rich people who are some of the right. It's almost like their brain falls apart when they go into politics. Like they have all the success in business, and then they try to take their money into politics, and they just make an ass of themselves. But I think that what you're quite right here that what we're seeing is a number of people, like you said, Youngkin, McCormick, etc. And to me, I think the ingredient here is not only a lot of wealth, but it's like the right distance from politics, right? So clearly, I mean, David McCormick is not a guy who's been running for election after election for all these years, but to call him a political outsider is stretching it too. When his wife has, both he and his wife have served at the highest levels of government. They've certainly played the game in the private sector, so they know how politics works. And I think that Maybe that is sort of the other side of what I'm saying about a guy like Blake Masters. Is he's wealthy, and he's not a career politician, but I would not by any means call him a political outsider.
Right, right, right. Well, he's not like he's like these are not candidates that were grown on the Republican farm team. You know, they didn't like start as dog catcher and work their way through the state house. But it probably tells you what the farm team really is in politics, which are the money men who are, you know, funding the dog catcher and state house races and sort of eyeing their opportunity to come in at a higher level later in their career. That's probably what the real team is.
Yeah, and maybe what we're talking about also is just kind of a correlate of the more fundamental issue, which is simply discipline, right? So you look at a guy like David McCormick. I mean, I would say relatively low on charisma. I think his closing argument was quite bad, but the one thing that everyone said, all the guests who have come on here, everyone in the media, is that he was just executing in a very, very disciplined way, much more so than anyone else in the race, and that really matters.
What can I give another alpha talk to you?
Yeah.
Hacky Washington D.C. reporters.
They're an alpha.
Well, I mean, they're an alpha. It's like I don't know if we need to bring a lawyer in to debate what the definition of an alpha dog is, but like, you know, they're an alpha dog that's provided a lot of alpha for us. So, so maybe I don't know, is that a beta or an alpha?
Well, say more.
Well, I think that they've just been providing a lot of transparently fake news that's been making it really easy to bet on the last kind of year of politics. You know, whether it's like propping up fake candidates like Kathy Barnett, Madison Cawthorn, and Carrick Flynn, or also like there is this perpetual motion device of money making that we've just been riding for more than a year now, which is hacky DC reporters publish a story about Build Back Better or tax increases or something coming back. Then either Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema releases a statement that says they're for half of it and against half of it. And then like the other person says they're against the other half. And it just like keeps the wheels spinning for, you know, a nice 20% gain every 3 or 4 months, just because these reporters keep reporting fake news.
I do get the sense, tell me if you agree, but I increasingly think even people with relatively serious journalistic credentials, it's almost like they're not even trying anymore, right? I mean, it's almost like they just write stuff that, and you wonder, like, can they actually be that dumb? I mean, I'll give you a case study, which is this woman, Selena Zito, she's a fairly well-known national political reporter, writes all over the place. And I mean, she wrote a piece in the Examiner, which ended up moving the markets, basically saying that Kathy Barnett was almost certainly going to win. And then she was also just saying that that 20-something% of the electorate would be the reason why Barnett wins. So in other words, I mean, when you think about that, it would have had to mean like 5 different candidates or at least 4 different candidates really doing well. I mean, I don't know how you can be doing any kind of serious reporting or analysis of that race and just write that confidently. And yet, I mean, she wrote the piece, staked her reputation on the line. Some presumably serious opinion editor staked their reputation on the line to run that piece. And then it actually, as you said, moved the markets quite a bit. So, yeah, I mean maybe... Yeah.
I think the real business that most journalists are in is providing catnip to like various online communities that they know how to trigger. So I think that's what's really going on. I don't think that they're like criticizing government. I don't think that they're investigating things and surfacing new information. I think most of them are just putting catnip out there for people to get triggered by and share with their friends.
Yeah. Well, look, I hope, I mean, not to take ourselves too seriously, but I hope one of the things we can do on this platform is actually highlight the journalists who are actually doing their job, because they are out there, of course. But yeah,
right.
But yeah, I mean, I think the point you make is from the standpoint of betting. I mean, there is a shockingly kind of high premium to just finding these fake journalists, sensational stories, because they will move the market, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out which of these are fake, and simply betting against that, even if you don't really know what's going on, can be profitable.
All right, another alpha dog.
Yeah.
The boys.
Okay, what's the case?
Um, you know how they always say like nice guys finish last?
Yeah.
You don't like cliches, do you?
No, not really.
Okay, well, in this case, I like this cliche. Nice guys don't always finish last. We put a lot of information out there into the ether, and the boys give back sometimes. In fact, I was just talking to Jason Pipkin about this, who also has an excellent blog, and he receives great tips from the boys too. We had the boys in our DMs telling us to bet against Hansy Herbie in Nebraska, a race that I didn't know a goddamn thing about. We've had the boys in our email inbox telling us to bet on Ukraine winning that Eurovision contest, which they did. We've had the boys in our inbox introducing us to great reporters. Charles would be the most recent, great experts who aren't publishing fake stories like most people with like newspaper columns. So I just think like there's so much unrealized potential in this community just because there's so many smart people who are connected to so many different industries and regions and communities that like we've only really scratched the surface of what we can do. And it's just been a great couple of weeks for the boys, pulling through on behalf of us, Star Spangled Gamblers.
So I agree, obviously, and I will just add, like, especially on election night and stuff, I'm hard pressed to think of anywhere outside of like the predicted comment sections, for example, that have as much not only up-to-date information, but also not only good analysis, but just really funny commentary. But I do have to challenge you a little bit, which is say that we just criticize the national media and so forth, but let's be honest that the prediction markets had a very mixed night last night as well. The idea of wisdom of crowds and all that, I think, was on a relatively shaky foundation last night. And then even many of the top bettors who are very clearly beating the markets day in, day out, kind of had a mixed night. Some of the top traders in our community were very bullish on Kathy Barnett, for example. Some of the wine mom picks in Oregon were hit or
Don't fuck
miss,
that up.
etc. So, I don't know. I think it's worth mentioning. What would you say about the mixed performance of the betting community last night?
I think that bettors, we've said this before, I think that bettors have the same problem that journalists do sometimes, which is they get really excited about being like the first person to discover what they think is like a decisive story. But I guess in place of a story, it would be a bet, a candidate or like an advantage they think they have in a market. And I do think that they get seduced by that. I think people did get seduced by, going on the ride all the way with Kathy Barnett or, everyone likes a long shot. So I think that that's a thing. But I think by and large, if you look past prediction markets themselves and at the people who consistently win in prediction markets, you're really looking at like a savant class of people that are just doing this for a different reason. And I think that they produce results because of that.
Yeah, look, I think to me the lesson is number one, prediction and betting is just really hard. And I think there's a reason why people don't in the mainstream don't actually want the accountability, because it would just make a lot of people look bad. And I do think that people in the betting community, above all, they actually are interested in the truth and making money. And the fact that all of us just miss so often, so frequently, goes to show how hard this is. But I also think that what it shows is that political betting is a skill in a community that's very underdeveloped. And like any sport or instrument or any skill, the people who start out, like the rate of progress, the skill can advance really quickly. So the point is, I think we're very early into this. Even the best people in this aren't very good. There's a lot of room to improve. And I think that if all of us just stick at it, even in a few years, I think the quality of betting, I expect to get a lot better over the years.
Well, I love that. And part of me wants to end this podcast on that, but I do want to just throw out one more beta boy as a corollary to that.
Okay.
Playing it safe and wanting to be liked. It's just not a successful betting strategy.
Um, say more. I may be on the opposite side of that.
I think that it feels comfortable betting. This is something I have to find myself. It feels comfortable to bet with the crowd, because it just always feels safer in a crowd. But like, how many races last night just proved that even a crowd of very smart traders sometimes is marching off a cliff. So, I personally feel like I lose more money on the bets that I don't make, or on the bets that I don't hold, for as long as they can run. And that is a trait of being a great trader. The thing that I admire the most in the people who really, really, really earn in this is their ability to be alone and be stomach losses and stomach criticism, and then eventually be right over time.
So I agree with that, but the reason why my instinct was to take the opposite side is that I also think that even among top traders, I think a lot of people admit, it's probably true in my case too, that I think because we enjoy betting so much, we enjoy being part of the community, we feel a need to take part in every market, every exciting race. When, if you think about what is the ultimate beta move, it's like not even to get involved with a close, uncertain race like Pennsylvania. Just park that money in the safer bets that don't pay out right away, but you wait a few more months and you'll get a good return. And my view is that there's no shame in doing that. And in fact, it's a sign of the highest discipline, right? That you can forego the excitement, forego the energy and the uncertainty and the prospect of a quick win, and stick to what you know and be disciplined about that. And at the end of the year, come out ahead.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably the safe way to do it. And frankly, like, whether by accident or not, a lot of my best bets are ones that I just forget I make, and I wake up and see them hit. So I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. I almost feel like certain exchanges are more optimized for this too, though. Like, I feel like Predictit and Polymarket are very degen friendly, but for better or worse, like Kalshi is not like a very degen friendly betting platform.
Yeah, I mean, there is something about the Predictit platform in particular. Maybe it's just me, but like I just kind of always feel like trading and moving things around, even when my even when my logical brain is telling me not to do that.
Right.
So I don't know. Maybe it's good design on their
Right.
part.
Right. Well, we'll leave that to someone else to figure out. Okay. Well, I'm out of bullets. I feel like for a retrospective podcast, this is about as much as we can expect the boys to stomach. But we'll be rolling out later this week a special on Texas 28, that primary between what's his face Cuellar and what's her face Cisneros. And we'll be adding layers upon layers upon that. But it's just been a really fun week, great week for star-spangled gamblers and political gambling.
I mean, not to we will do more on this, but we also have a new title belt winner after
Oh,
last night, so we will more to come on that.
that's right. We're going to introduce the new title belt winner. We're also going to form a title belt committee. So a lot going forward. Let's just cut it off at that. But Pratik, congratulations on a great couple weeks, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, sounds good.